Hi, everyone. I wish I could see your faces so I would have a sense that you're really there, but I do see some numbers down there, which is great. Let me just kind of tell you a little bit about how I'm imagining doing this today. I've learned recently, because I've been doing lots of speaking, that the average attention span that we all have is 17 minutes. So my goal is to not speak more than 17 minutes, and that way we open up for Q&A, because I don't know who's here. Some of you may know a lot about mother hunger. Some of you may not know much about it at all. So I'll do kind of a general discussion about what it is and how I came up with this concept. And then I think I'm going to open it up to you, because it looks like there are a good number of you here. And so I'm thinking your questions are going to feel a lot more rich and for all of us. For those of you that don't know me, though, my first book is Ready to Heal. And I was really happy when the Center for Healthy Sex started using this book to help those of you that struggle with love addiction, relationship addiction. And it's written for women. So I think it's been used mostly in the women's program. You know, when I first wrote this book, it was 2008. Epigenetics didn't even hit the stage till 2007. So I was a little bit out of my comfort zone, talking about something that seemed intergenerational, something that seemed inherited, something about mothering that was causing a deficit in our bonding that was then later impacting us. So I used the word mother hunger in that book, and I got a lot of crap from therapists, but not from Alex. So anyway, 4 years later, though, believe it or not, Ready to Heal sells out. They want me to write another book. I said, only if I can write a whole chapter on mother hunger. Well, I had gotten enough interest. That chapter in mother hunger is what then changed my whole practice. People came to see me just to work through, identify, and heal mother hunger. I never wanted to write another book, but this is it. And yes, I did write this book for daughters. However, mother hunger applies to both men and women. And I'll be speaking to why and how and what the differences might be. But I won't go into a whole lot of that, as we are all so unique in how we identify on a spectrum of gender. And regardless, as humans, we all have the same needs for a mother. So I've been treating mother hunger for years, even designed a whole new treatment protocol. That's all on my website, so I won't bore you with that. But writing about mother hunger is a whole different thing. I really never wanted to write this book. I knew what it was going to take, but I'm so glad I've done it now. It's helping people, and I'm so excited about that. But to write it, I first had to figure out, how do we define mothering? What is it that I've been treating? I know I've been treating a deficit in mothering, but what have I been doing exactly? How would I quantify it? How would I operationalize what a mother does? So I started with going to the dictionary and looked up what Webster's definition of mothering is. And here's what I got. To mother is to care for someone as a mother would. Okay, that was my first clue of, no wonder we're all kind of lost about this. We're all kind of even wary to talk about it. It's taboo to talk about our mothers anyway. But if we don't really actually know how complicated, complex, and all-encompassing this job is, makes it really hard, not only to talk about it, but to treat it and to identify when something goes missing. So the first thing I did to write this book is to really operationalize what's happening. Here are the 3 essential things a mother's job involves: nurturing, protecting, and then guiding. Nurturing is what every human infant needs. Without nurturing, and nurturing involves feeding, holding, touching, talking, cooing, cradling, tending, attuning, all those things that as little mammals, we're born thinking we're going to have. We're wired for it. That is nurturing. You all know the studies that say that when babies aren't held, they don't thrive. And we know the studies from the orphanages in Romania where babies did die. They were given food, they were given shelter, but they weren't held and they didn't survive. So nurturing is essential, and it's been sadly underestimated. And we'll get more to that. The next thing that's almost just as essential is protection. Little babies need to be protected. They need protection from aggressive siblings, insensitive partners, the weather, disease, loud noises. They need protection from the world. And then even as we grow, given the way that our world is changing and the internet through phones comes into our home and robs our children of innocence, parental protection is becoming more and more important. And then finally, there's guidance. Everyone wants a mother they admire. Everyone wants a mother that inspires them. For sons and daughters, this is where it might be different. Sons right around adolescence may start to turn to the world of men to find guidance, to find men who inspire them, guide them. And women don't have to do that. Girls can keep their gaze on their mothers. We want her to bring us into the world of women. We want her to teach us, inspire us just by who she is and by example, not by what she's saying. So these are the three essential elements. So a clinical term for mother hunger would be if one of those goes missing. Let's say there's not enough nurturing, maybe there's protection, maybe there's some guidance, but not enough nurturing, that may create some insecure attachment. Maybe there's no protection. There's plenty of nurturing. Mom was present and playful, or the nanny was, but mother, she wasn't safe. And so her children weren't safe. That creates an insecure attachment. What mother hunger is a name for insecure attachment. And then the science tells us that 50% of us are securely attached, which I think is overly generous. Those folks don't come into my office needing treatment. They certainly don't identify with the term mother hunger. The other 50% of us, when they hear this word, may experience a body sensation of, ah, that's what it is. That's the missing piece. It's a term for insecure attachment without calling anyone insecure or without putting you into a category of anxious or avoidant or disorganized. Disorganized is actually third degree mother hunger. And I will say a few words about that because it's its own specific category that after years of treating this, I realized needed its own name. So we could have insecure attachment. I've always grown up thinking something's not quite right with the way we relate to others, but we always thought maybe it's either something wrong with them or something wrong with me. Again, this is sometimes where it's different for men and for women, based on what our culture is also telling us. As women, we live in a culture that doesn't like us very much. And so the mix of patriarchy and misogyny makes it really difficult for our grandmothers, our mothers, and for ourselves as women to have a sense that we're basically okay, or to have a sense that we're safe. And it's in this context that I spend a lot of time writing about in the book that mother hunger grows and forms. It's in this context of patriarchy that a system such as behaviorism, psychological theory such as behaviorism for the early 1900s, it was John Watson that taught us all, because he was a student of Pavlov, that we could train babies like dogs. Behaviorism is toxic for secure attachment. And the philosophy of behaviorism still infiltrates psychology textbooks today. It's because of the behaviorists that we think sleep training a baby is okay, even though that infant comes into the world designed for connection with one primary caregiver who will nurture and protect that infant. And if it can't be the mother, she has to go back to work, or she has to give the baby away, or she dies, or she's sick. Anyone who can step in as a nurturer, a well-informed nurturer, and someone who can be protective doesn't create mother hunger. So it doesn't have to be the mother, but it does have to be one favorite primary caregiver who is on call for these basic attachment needs that we all have as mammals, as primates. If you watch puppies, if you watch kittens, you see Mother Nature's design in action. Co-sleeping, eating on demand. This is what human babies need. And so sleep training is a leftover from behaviorism. Sleep training has nothing to do with creating secure attachment, nor are the attachment theory people involved in promoting sleep training. The other thing that's really problematic for nurturing an early sense of safety is sending an infant to daycare at 6 weeks old. We have evidence that shows that little ones, when they're too young and they're in daycare where they don't have their primary caregiver, in fact, it's loud, they may not get their needs met when they're crying, have 75% higher cortisol levels in their brain than infants who are at home with a primary caregiver. Someone they can rely on, someone who trusts, and someone who's responding to their needs. We know that cortisol is poison for the developing mind. And we're only just starting to see what the implications here are for ADHD and trauma. This is what I'm covering in the nurturing section of the book. In the protection section of the book, instead of using case studies, I'm using Hollywood. So we have a great example of lack of maternal protection when we see the case of Dirty John. Many of you have maybe seen it. And it's a great example of when a mother is not safe. She does not protect her daughters, which is very different than the mother being abusive, let's say. She's just simply not paying attention to her daughters. She's gaslighting her daughters in the interest of preserving a marriage in which she's not safe. So what I've done is use media or memoir to illustrate these concepts, because the stories I have, after 10 years of working with mother hunger, are simply too heartbreaking to put into a book. To illustrate the guidance concept, I've used the memoir Wild Game, which is a beautiful coming of age story written by a fabulous author. She talks about when she was 14, she gets her first kiss, very age appropriate, and it's summertime, and she's at the beach, and she's going to bed that night and curling up and just relishing in the moment of her first, and in comes her mother, all excited, in the dark, whispers to her daughter, "I've got to tell you something." And I'm not spoiling this because this is all in the very first 2 paragraphs. She tells her daughter that she has just been kissed by their family's best friend, husband, and is beginning an affair. The daughter then becomes so excited that mom talked to me, mom chose me, that she drops her own story and becomes her mother's best friend and accomplice. This story of enmeshment, this story of complicity in a secret, this story of mother taking daughter on, is a great example of how maternal guidance is not going well. Many of you call it enmeshment. If you're clinicians, they're familiar with Ken Adams' work. This is a lot of what he works with as well. But we'll go into depth about how this happens in ways that romanticize mother and daughter as best friends, like the Gilmore Girls, and what's really happening there for a daughter. So those are the parts of the book that lead us up to third-degree mother hunger. Third-degree mother hunger happens when a child, a daughter, receives absolutely no nurturing, no protection, no guidance, and in fact, her mother is frightening. And again, this can happen for boys or girls. To have a frightening mother who no doubt has her own third-degree mother hunger, has been part of an ancestral legacy of intergenerational trauma, which we cover in the book, simply cannot be a safe place. And when we are little ones and our only choice is to bond with someone who's threatening us, our entire attachment system gets disorganized, which is why this is the category for disorganized attachment. And since we don't talk about that a lot, I think you'll find this chapter super helpful, clinically or as a layperson, because if you've ever been given a diagnosis that felt shaming or unfair, such as borderline personality disorder or bipolar disorder, I think you're going to find some relief in this chapter. There's nothing disordered about you. If you had to bond with the very same person who was threatening you. Your whole personality structure changed, and relationships are not going to be something that feels safe. And it takes a whole different type of healing process to address third degree mother hunger. And I don't know anyone who has third degree mother hunger who does not also have multiple addictions. So hopefully that's also validating. The healing chapter is going to explain 2 of the reasons healing mother hunger is so difficult. And then I'm going to wrap this up because I see many questions coming in. Here's what stalls healing mother hunger. Number 1, we've had no name. And without a name, we can't see what it is that needs healing. We can't see the pain. We can't see the heartbreak. The good news is the minute we have this name, and I hear this every day from people reading the book, is, oh, finally, it's not just me. I'm not broken. There's nothing wrong with me. There's a reason. So that right away relieves shame. And then the body in all its glory knows how to heal. Once the shame is removed, our body immediately starts to fall into what it knows how to do, which is heal. There is still one other stumbling block, and that's grief. And I'm actually going to call it disenfranchised grief, because when we're grieving, but we don't have a place to go with that grief because the culture doesn't recognize it, that's disenfranchised grief. Grief we're not supposed to have. You may know what this feels like. Maybe you've been someone to have an affair and you've needed to let go of that affair partner. And maybe it was the right thing for you to do for your family and your life, but you grieved. And where did you go with that grief? It was disenfranchised. Where do you go to talk about mother hunger when there's not a support group? Or when the culture thinks you're a bad person if you want to say anything about your mother less than she's marvelous? This is a real stumbling block, and it's the one I'm working on very diligently right now. I am spending free time training clinicians to get mother hunger groups up and going so that the other stumbling block, disenfranchised grief, the loneliness that comes from not having a place to go to talk to other people like we do when we have cancer, will no longer be a stumbling block. Okay, I think what I'd like to do is wrap up and start answering your questions. And if we run into a stopping point and you don't have any more questions and we still have some more time, maybe we can look at a few questions I have for you. So I'm going to go into the Q&A section here. Let's see. I see an open question that says insecure attachment means what? Okay. So insecure attachment is a clinical term that we use in attachment theory to study really what is the overarching now psychological theory that helps us understand why humans do what we do and love who we love. So you're either, as a child, securely attached, which means you got just enough from your caregivers that you have a pretty good sense of who you are. You generally make decisions that reflect who you are. You may even be able to design and create a life as you grow into adulthood that reflects who you are. 50% of the population fall into this category. The other 50% of the population do not, and struggle with relationships, struggle with moods, and struggle to have a sense of what am I here to do in life? And how do I find a career that actually reflects my desires, actually makes me happy? I'm actually excited to get out of bed in the morning. So there you go. Is it possible for us to get a secure attachment from a caregiver other than our mother? Yes, totally. Yes, this is why I was saying that if a caregiver can provide, and I want to say the word adequate. So a loving babysitter could do it, hopefully, if that babysitter is around a lot. So we need consistent nurturing, consistent protection when we're 0 to 3. And those are the most formative times when the brain is growing the fastest and when the imprint of good nurturing and good protection sets us up for secure attachment. And definitely a babysitter can do that. A partner can do that. A grandmother could do that. A grandfather could do that. but we need that person to be around consistently during the first 3 years. Here's an interesting one. I'm curious if Kelly has kids and how she feels about postpartum anxiety and depression. Select an alternative caregiver. Cases where the child and mother's well-being may be at odds. Yes, I have so many thoughts about postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. So many thoughts, in fact, that I wrote a note at the end of the Mother Hunger book, a note for new mothers. Because I want to help mothers understand the preparation before birth and pregnancy and what to do, really what factors come into creating postpartum depression and anxiety, which I think is untreated mother hunger. Generally, a lot of this has to do with carrying our own mother hunger in our body. Hospitals also don't help, so I talk a lot about that. Yes, I have a child, one, very difficult birth, very difficult postpartum period from my own untreated stuff. The good thing I did have at the time, I did have attachment theory and knowledge, and I was being taught by attachment parenting specialists. So I knew to feed on demand. I knew to share sleep, that leaving a baby alone in a crib to cry was going to cause problems. I now know biologically exactly what's going on to that baby in a crib who's left to cry. They're going down into a dorsal state, which basically they think they're going to die. So I didn't do those things, but I needed a lot more help. Every mother needs a lot more help in the first, well, I call it the fourth trimester, which is the first 3 months after birth. That trimester is when mothers need as much nurturing and protection as they need to give their babies. When a baby's old enough to go to daycare, when is a baby old enough to go to daycare? Is there an amount of time during the day that a baby can be away from mom that creates secure attachment? The studies out there, and I didn't, this isn't a parenting manual, so I didn't put a lot in there, but the studies out there seem to suggest that between the ages of 2.5 and 3 are when babies move from parallel play, meaning they're just playing. They know there's another baby there in the room, but they're not trying to really interact. But right around 2.5 and 3, they do start to interact. They may even have a desire to share, but before that, they don't. So to keep little ones at home till 2.5, 3 years old is a really, really good idea for giving the best setup for secure attachment. I'm well aware we're living in a world that makes this almost impossible. So I'm writing this book not to make mothers or fathers or families feel badly, but to be part of a solution of shifting a paradigm that puts such an importance on this first 3 years that this can inform policy. So there's a lot going on in this book. And I may be skipping ahead and missing some of your questions. And if I am, forgive me, I'm trying. Let's see, I see from Vivian, can this be reversed if adopting a child at age 8 or 9 who's in an unsafe environment? If I understand that, reversing, okay, so if we adopt a child 8 or 9 years old, and let's say this child's formative years were less than ideal, so they probably come to us with feelings of insecurity, inadequate nurturing, yes, but this is a big job. And I think this is what I would want parents to know, that when we inherit children who didn't have those things met in the first formative months, we're going to be working really hard and probably round the clock. It will be helpful to know that separation anxiety is normal. It's helpful to know that there's no such thing as clinginess. If we have a child who's already avoidant because they already gave up, it may be really hard to reach that child, and it could take a long time for that child to trust us. Let's see. Crying for joy that you validation my multiple addictions. Oh, I'm so glad. That's mainly what I want to do. Well, there's a lot I want to do, but that's a big one. Thank you for your hard work. Why do I still suffer from mother hunger and secure attachment, even though I had other healthy motherly figures, grandmother, friend's mom in my life who provided nurturing, protection, and guidance, but my mother did not provide the protection and guidance I wished for in my childhood and adolescence? Why do I still feel the effect? Well, Here are some reasons why that could be. Our mother is our first love, like it or not. So let's say that in utero, let's say she was anxious, maybe ambivalent about her pregnancy. Maybe she wasn't supported. Maybe she wasn't ready to be pregnant. Maybe she was living in terror. Maybe she was pregnant during 9/11. These children are born with a sense of anxiety. Anything the mother was feeling in the last trimester, especially, and this is all Rachel Yehuda's research, travels through the placenta right into us as babies. I'll use myself as an example. My mother got pregnant unexpectedly. She was Catholic. It wasn't really supposed to happen. So I was swallowing in the belief I shouldn't be here. Oh no, what's going to happen? She was panicked. She rushes into a marriage. Not a great situation. So let's say a mother has a baby she's not quite ready for and may want to be ready, but she's not, and she doesn't know what to do. So she lets the baby cry it out. You're not going to have those memories. You're not going to remember the time she didn't pick you up that you weren't crying, but your body does. And this is why working with an expert in attachment and trauma can really help reclaim the story that your body has that your mind doesn't have, because it all got imprinted before you had language. And there's so much there with the story. Let's see. I know it is a very personal, but what is the process in general for healing from mother hunger, as in what are the specific modalities and tools? Okay, so I have an entire chapter on that here about how to heal. And I'll say briefly, the beautiful part about operationalizing mother hunger is you read the book and you figure out, oh, I missed out on nurturing. So at the back of the book, I've got all these exercises for replacing nurturing now. You're the mother now. I've got exercises for how to repair lack of protection. Those of us that grew up without adequate protection are going to generally feel anxious all the time. So I've got all kinds of exercises, including left and right nostril breathing, that helps with reducing anxiety, even in the moment. Let's say you identify with lack of guidance after reading the book. Finding guidance is sometimes one of the easiest things to do, because that could be as easy as hiring a coach, getting a good mentor. It depends on what kind of guidance you want. Do you want career guidance, or do you want guidance on how to be a parent? Or do you need guidance on how to knit or how to play golf? So, guidance is one of those that's easier than the others, I think. If you have third degree mother hunger, I will just say this, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. Healing third degree mother hunger is the hardest work you'll ever do in your life, and it's lifelong work. For healing third degree mother hunger, you have to have a clinician. The others maybe not, but for healing third degree mother hunger, you have to have a clinician who's trauma trained, and not just trained in post-traumatic stress disorder, because this is much harder than post-traumatic stress disorder. This is complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD, which is not even in the DSM yet. Here, it is over in the UK. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, for those of you that don't know what it is when stress that was beyond what you could tolerate was happening in an ongoing, reoccurring, unending nature. Wasn't just one time, as in post-traumatic stress, where a car wreck or a terrible event that we can work through. No, this is ongoing. You live in it, you swim in it. And so it is permanently changed the way you feel about people, the way you feel about yourself. I say permanently because depending on how long you're swimming around in a family that's that toxic, let's say you were home living in that for a long, long time, it can take that long and longer to work to alter the brain. And so much damage can happen before, let's say you leave that home, but then before you find help, you've also then replayed the self-injury that you learned from growing up with a mother who was harmful. We replay that out. That's the cause of many eating disorders, cutting, addictions. And we do so much harm to ourselves trying to live with third degree mother hunger that by the time we get to treatment, many of us are older. So I hope that helps a little bit. How does someone get diagnosed with mother hunger? Can any therapist help heal this? Well, it's not an official diagnosis. This is not in the DSM. So I think when people hear the term, if the term's like, that's a diagnosis. If this term resonates for you, then you could probably, it won't be a waste of your time to spend some time either listening to my podcast, look at my Instagram page, get the book. If you don't like reading, I really am hearing from people that they're enjoying the audiobook. I recorded it for 3 days, and I'm thrilled that it turned out really well. And what I'm hearing from people is that they put it in their ears, like at night when they're trying to go to sleep, they're finally done with the day's tasks, or maybe in the car, and that my voice is a lot more soothing than if they're reading the book and they hear their mother's voice or they hear their own voice. So that's also a really helpful way to start to diagnose. Can you talk a little bit more about how dopamine affects the nurturing process, and what kind of situations are the ones that create this chemical reaction in the baby's brain? Yes, I'd love to. So it's really, there's dopamine, but there's serotonin and there's oxytocin. These are the main things going on in the first 3 years. So oxytocin is a little more important even than dopamine. It's setting us up to later enjoy dopamine. And here's why. Oxytocin is something that as humans, we all enjoy. It's called the love drug. It's the bonding hormone. Oxytocin is what's released during orgasm so that we want more bonding. We want more touch. But let me tell you this, women have 3 times more oxytocin receptors in their body than men do. Why would that be? Well, that's because oxytocin is released during lactation. When a mother brings her baby up to nurse, her whole body is flooded with oxytocin. And oxytocin makes her fall desperately in love with this baby, which is why it's unfortunate we don't support mothers in nursing, because if a mother comes to motherhood and she's got her own mother hunger and she doesn't know what she's doing, if she'll nurse that baby, body will teach her. Mother Nature's design is oxytocin is going to flood her and make her want to crave that baby. Then the more touch she has, the more oxytocin will be released. Oxytocin is also released during childbirth. Huge amounts of oxytocin are released in the whole body, changing the mother's brain from maiden to mother, wiring her to hear everything her baby does, feel her baby's heartbeat, and want to hold her baby, which is why when we tell her, put that baby down, we're messing with nature's plan. She needs to hold the baby. The oxytocin helps her want to stay close, and it actually grows the baby's brain. Plenty of oxytocin, good bonding, later leads to the dopamine that feels so good when we enjoy human bonding. Serotonin is also being released to calm down a mother so that she will sit still. It's released during breastfeeding. So is prolactin, so is oxytocin, so that life will slow down. She won't worry about doing the dishes or getting back to work. She's going to want to bond. This is in the best service for all of us, that we get on board with this process and how essential it is. Okay, I hope I answered that adequately. There's more in the book. Let's see. I'm curious why you think it's taboo to talk about the mother in our culture. It's interesting to experience and witness. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I think best case scenario, it's taboo because mothers are all doing their best. So let's not find something to hammer them about. I don't want to blame women. I don't want to blame mothers. On the other side, though, and also mothers are a lot of brunt of bad jokes, which I think is part of misogyny. But on the flip side of this, if we actually did start talking about this in a real way, like I'm doing with you right now, and in this book, we would have to really question our policies. We'd have to question family leave. We'd have to look at why aren't we paying mothers for this work that would set everyone up to not need an addiction, to have better chance of mental health. It would require that we really turn the whole idea of independence is the way we're all going on its ear and look at how interconnected we are. We'd have to look at how much we need our mother and how much we need each other. And I think in patriarchy, there's a fear that that makes us weak. There's a fear that that would make us non-competitive in a global market. I think it's a big issue that's fueled by interests that are more about independence and money than they are about how much we need each other. How do you manage the I don't want to be my mother pressure after experiencing this? Well, I think any sense of I don't want to be my mother shows that you probably want to be a good mother. So I think if you've got a sense of I want to be a good mother, you probably are going to be. You're probably going to go read good books on attachment. You're going to know what not to do if you don't want to be your mother. And the work you're going to have to do is, okay, if I know what not to do, now what do I do? So it's about finding good guidance and probably finding some good friends who support you. Because if you don't want to be your mother, chances are you don't want to go to her when you become a mother. She's not going to be who you go to for advice, comfort, nurturing. You're going to need good friends. Here's a question. How do I heal from insecure attachment? I don't know who I am or what I want to do with my life. I feel like I have no sense of myself sometimes. That's a beautiful description of insecure attachment and what it feels like. Here's my answer for you. Insecure attachment happened in a relationship. It's a relational injury. It's an attachment injury. It's not a disorder. There's nothing wrong with you. You were hurt in the context of a relationship. So healing insecure attachment happens in the context of a relationship. So the work of it is picking relationships that are healthy for you so you don't get re-wounded and become more insecure. And this is why I wrote my first book about love addiction, because I think so many times we get into a relationship, right? And we need a relationship to heal. But if we grew up in relationships that were inherently unhealthy, that's what feels normal to us. So we attract unhealthy partners. We ourselves are unhealthy partners, and we kind of get more and more insecure. That's the addictive cycle. So a lot of times that's why healing from insecure attachment might need to start with a therapist who's trained in attachment theory, who's going to model what a healthy relationship could look like. I also think that the 12-step programs, if you can find healthy sponsors and healthy role models there, really do help with insecure attachment. Can you talk more about disenfranchised grief in relation to losing a mother at an early age, say associated with a mother's death in a child's early life? Sure, and I'd like to add this. Early in my writing career, I came across the work of Hope Edelman, which she wrote the Bible for motherless daughters. It was called Motherless Daughters. And she writes for daughters who lost their mother prematurely to death. And here's the difference with losing a mother to death. The grief is different because it's so evident. Like if your mom dies, I think people know you're going to grieve. Not that they know what to do with you and not that there's adequate support, but Hope Edelman's been working to build motherless daughter groups for 20 years. I wouldn't call that disenfranchised grief. That's grief that a culture recognizes and everyone knows. It's when your mother's alive, but she's not behaving as a mother. So she's physically there, but emotionally not there. That no one seems to understand that really your body knows you're motherless, but the culture sees your mother still there. So there's no place to go talk about that grief. That's what I mean by disenfranchised grief. Let's see, how would you explain a diagnosis like histrionic to a client who has insecure attachment and demonstrates an ability to gauge a real relationship, tends to think there's more intimacy than there really is and results in stalking? I'm going to just simplify this by saying fantasizing about what a relationship really is to the point of stalking starts when we have to fantasize that we have a mother other than who we have. When we are little, we really cannot know. It's called betrayal blindness. We cannot know that our mother or caregiver is not providing what we need. If we knew that when we were babies or toddlers or even children under the age of 7, think how terrified we'd be. We can't run. We can't really fight her. So our brain protects us with this thing that I call betrayal blindness. It's actually not my term. It's Jennifer Freyd's term. She's written a book on betrayal blindness. It's our body's way of protecting us when we are dependent on a caregiver that's not able to do the care we need. So what ends up happening is we create the mother we want in our mind. We pretend we have a mother that loves us, even if she doesn't. Rather than look at what she could be doing wrong, we can't see it. We think she's perfect. So instead, we feel like we're wrong. And we also learn to fantasize. So adults who have the art of fantasy down to a science, where they're able to fall in love with someone they've never met or stalk someone, convinced this person will just come around and learn, have generally been doing that their whole lives. So it's a much more compassionate way to understand it if we look and go back and trace the original time this person had to go beg for love or had to go chase down love. Let's see. Oh my goodness. I feel like I'm hearing my story for the first time. Oh, I love this. I get to hear this periodically when I'm talking with people on Instagram or they are reaching out to me. So thank you. Let's see, down to the bipolar diagnosis, everything. I finally cut her off this past August. Way to go. Just before my 34th birthday. I can't wait to read your book. I've read Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Good book, which was so enlightening. Yes. My question. Do you ever see clients whose mothers recognize their own trauma and what they put us through and change and recover? Yes, I do. It's rare. I can tell you a story about one right now. Generally, I'm working with the mom. So I'm working with a mother now. She's 61. She has 4 daughters. And in the process of working with her and getting her daughters in with some of my wonderful colleagues, the healing that's going on in this family is nothing short of gorgeous. Gorgeous. I wish I had a lot more examples of this. I think when a mother gets in and gets some good treatment and can identify her own mother hunger and then see what she did to cause harm, there's great potential for healing. I think that's rare. But my hope is with this book, it will become more common. I think it's very normal for us to wish our mothers would do this as daughters. And we have to be careful of that fantasy. Let's see. I have severe jealousy, anxiety when I'm in a relationship that their head will turn. Oh yeah, they will attach to someone that I'm not enough to keep them. It sabotages almost all my relationships and has ended my 20-year marriage. Yeah. How do I boost my confidence, build self-esteem to not trigger this? Great question. You know, I would want to know more about you to answer this well. Like, how many times have you been betrayed by someone in a relationship where they actually did go outside the relationship, giving you the message you weren't enough? But if I were working with you, I would be going back much further to see when you first noticed that you couldn't keep the attention of your mother or your favorite caregiver. When did you first feel like you were not enough? When did you first feel like they would rather be doing something other than being with you? And what did that feel like? And what did you do to compensate? I would want to explore those questions with you. I have mother hunger, and I think one of my daughters does, and one of them does not. Is this a rational thought? Of course, it's a rational thought. But rather than saying, is this a rational thought? How about, is this a good question or is this a good curiosity? I think if you're questioning your own mother hunger and your children's mother hunger, that's because you love them. Curiosity is one of the most beautiful demonstrations of love. That doesn't mean you go to your daughters or your children and say, hey, I think I have mother hunger and you probably do too. I've not seen that go well at all. I think as a mother, if we're getting in touch with our own mother hunger, we got to keep the focus on ourselves and not go to our children to talk about our mother hunger or to ask them about theirs. I've not seen that go well. I really try to keep mothers in their own lane work on yourself. Trust that as you heal, your body language changes, your facial expressions changes. Your children are going to benefit from that. They'll find this work when it's time and when they're ready. It is a tremendous privilege for many not to put their children in childcare after 6 weeks. How do we reassure mothers that they are not harming their children if they need childcare at this time? There is no reassurance. And that's the science. I'm the messenger. There is no reassurance. This is not optimal for babies. It's actually really, really terrible. So we can support mothers in finding alternatives in any way they can. And this is why I'm writing this book. I think if more women had this information in school, in a health class, in high school, in college, think of the well-informed decisions we could make about when and if, in the world the way it is, we want to do this. We want to have children. It's terrible knowing what we know. This is a lot of information, but it's worse not knowing. Ignorance is worse than knowing this information. So I don't think the information is the problem. It's not knowing it and then blaming a child when they have attention deficit problems, but they've been in daycare growing up. We're going to have to really support infants and toddlers who are being raised in daycare and quit looking at them as if they're a problem when they can't regulate themselves. They've never learned. I lost my mother at 5, and I don't think I was nurtured from that point on. Dealing with multiple addictions, depression, disenfranchised grief. I relate to not having a sense of purpose, just as you described. Yeah, that's it. I hope you find this book helpful. I think you probably will. Thank you for sharing. How does not dealing with mother hunger uphold patriarchy, i.e. internalized patriarchy, which then scripts women to see other women as unsafe? Yep, exactly. And patriarchy. Exactly. You just said it. That's not even a question. That's just a beautiful statement that if we don't deal with mother hunger, we are basically participating in upholding patriarchy, which makes us competitors with one another and keeps us not trusting women. Sorry, the sun is really coming in on me at this point, so I know it's harder to see me. I'd like to schedule a one-on-one coaching session. Oh, okay. So let me just explain if others you may be having this feeling. I do have a place on my website under Work With Me where you can sign up for a one-time consultation. And in that consultation, what I'll be doing is going through with you, well, anything you want to talk about, but also helping you assess how's your treatment plan, what's working really well, what could we tweak, what might be better, things like that. So I've been doing these as a way to reach out to people since I can't take on new clients right now. And my mother hunger intensives have a 2-year waiting list. So I'm doing that right now to help. I'm also starting, I just publicized this yesterday on Instagram. This is all new for me, but I'm starting a series for mother hunger and the holidays. It's fairly affordable. It's $149 for 3 hours with me, 3 Thursdays starting next week, where we'll meet in a group like this, and you get to meet others that are struggling with mother hunger. We'll do Q&A, and I will be talking first about food and the holidays, then about family dynamics and the holidays, and guilt. Like, do you feel guilty if you don't go home? Do you feel guilty that you're even talking about this with anyone? So those will be our 3 topics, and I think that's another way if you want more support. How does enmeshment with our mothers occur differently for men and for women? Well, it is different because when men are enmeshed by mothers, I think this is where Ken Adams' work is so fantastic. What ends up is an avoidance style that can lead to sex addiction, where there's been an erotic connection that was inappropriate, drives a man to be avoidant with women, and that's going to complicate adult attachment patterns. I think with a daughter, very similarly, if she is enmeshed with her mother, she's going to be really avoidant with girlfriends, not really want to have friends. She's already had a friend that wore her out. She may be much more interested in men and have no girlfriends. Yeah. So this would be different too if I'm talking in somewhat heteronormative ways, but hopefully you know Ken Adams' work, Silently Seduced and Married to Mom. He works more with men. And the guidance section in my book, Mother Hunger, is about enmeshment with daughters. Okay, let's see. Let's take this one. What happens if someone had a frightening mother who could be abusive verbally and emotionally, but also gave a lot of nurturing, guidance, and arguably protection, aside from her own abuse? In this case, the mother's affirmation and approval was very dependent on meeting expectations. And oh yeah, so you had to earn it. If you met her expectations and you achieved and worked hard, you would get, yeah. I think this can still lead to some disorganized attachment and some complex trauma. And no mother is, well, and except, okay, here are the movies I used to illustrate disorganized attachment. If you want to watch something, the Billie Holiday movie, the recent one that came out, Judy, Renee Zellweger in Judy Garland, and Edith Piaf, La Vie en Rose. Edith Piaf and Judy Garland both died at age 47 because of third-degree mother hunger. Billie Holiday died at age 45. What you see in these stories, and there's so many stories like this, is they all, before the age of 3, had been so deprived of maternal protection and guidance and care, even though mom every now and then might have showed up and might have been funny, that they needed addiction, they starved themselves, they cut themselves, they drank too much, they were all addicted to love and men, sex, and they died young. So it doesn't all have to be that extreme to be third degree, but anytime your mother was frightening and could be verbally or emotionally abusive, it's a possibility. Can you say more about the dorsal stage the infants descend into if left to cry? A client of mine was raised in an orphanage, and I'm curious to know. Yeah, I'd love to, Brooke. So thank you for asking. So a baby left in a crib is completely helpless. This baby was born to be held and cradled. That's why they have arms. That's why mothers have arms. Being left in a crib is inherently already can startle a child, which is why they wake up and they do this. So if they're left and they're crying and no one comes, they can't get out of the crib and do anything about it. Crying is the fight response. That's not working. So fight response doesn't work. Flee response doesn't work. They can't appease. They haven't figured out how to do that yet. So they're going to drop down into freeze. They're going to drop into the freeze response. Literally, their heart rate's going to slow down. Their breathing's going to slow down. Mother Nature's preparing their little body to die. Mother Nature thinks this is really bad. No one's coming, and I don't want this infant to feel pain. So I'm going to numb this infant out and shut it down. So that's where dissociation starts. That's where numbing starts. If that happens more than 2 or 3 times to an infant, you're going to have a whole problem of trust, of bonding, and that's mother hunger has already set in. Here's a good question, because I hear this one a lot, so I'm getting a little general right now. What about when your mom was really present when you were less than 5, but became very unsafe after that point? I had a lot of trauma from my mother, who became a non-functioning alcoholic when I was 5. Yeah. You know, that's a great question. And it would just depend on the quality of care from 0 to 5. If there was, if she let you cry it out in the crib, I wouldn't say, may not have been that great. But if she was attentive and home and loving, or you had a good, consistent caregiver. So in other words, let's say you had secure attachment and then this happened, you're probably going to weather her adversity better than if you hadn't. But I don't want to minimize that alcoholism at any stage setting in, or any addiction, is going to interfere with parental guidance. And even the loss of parental guidance can set in mother hunger. So I hope that helps. I hope that helps. Okay. I've only got 3 minutes left, and it feels like what I really ought to do is say a goodbye that doesn't leave you terribly hanging, which is to say, and I see someone mentioning here something about adoption. I do have a section in chapter 2 about adoptees and mother hunger. It's an issue. I'm hearing more and more people on Instagram ask me about that too. So I'll be doing some videoing about that. I am really trying to keep current on Instagram with what I post and what I share. that would be a great place to follow along with me. It's Kelly McDaniel Therapy on Instagram. I'm not good at Facebook. I never check Facebook. So even though stuff gets posted on there, I never see it. So forgive me if you've posted and I haven't responded. The next best place to stay current with me is sign up for my newsletter. I will not bombard your inbox. I maybe send them out once every 2 months, more right now because of the holidays, but anything new I'm doing related to mother hunger will be in my newsletter or on my website. So as soon as I'm doing intensives again, and I'm training therapists. So if you go to the resource section on my website and you see who the resources are, those are people that have had enough time with me that you could check in to see when they're doing a mother hunger group or maybe offering some special help. That's just going to grow. I've got a wait list next year for therapists that are going to be training with me, and I'm so excited to get more up and going with this issue. If any of you on this call are clinicians, I've got a section on my website for professionals. If you want to work with me, that will also help. So maybe between the holiday sessions that I'm offering, Instagram or my newsletter, I'll get to meet some of you that have been here today. I wish I could see your faces. Thank you for your amazing questions and for just being interested in sexual health and relational health and attachment and mother hunger. Goodbye for now.